There's a moment, and every man who's ever been a coward knows it, when the right words sit right there on the tip of your tongue, and you still swallow them down. You dress them up as a joke. You hide behind a smirk. You tell yourself it doesn't matter. But it does. It always does. This is a story about one of those moments, set in the dust and the heat of the American frontier, 1882, in a town that barely had a name worth remembering. A story about a man who was good with a rifle and terrible with the truth, and a woman who was done waiting for men to mean what they said. And I'll warn you right now, by the time we get to the end of this, you're going to feel something. Maybe it's regret. Maybe it's hope. Maybe you're going to think about someone you let walk away. Stick around, because the best part is still coming. The town of Redrock Crossing sat between two dry ridges, like something the land forgot to wash away. 43 buildings, give or take a few that hadn't decided whether they were standing or falling. One saloon, one general store, one church that nobody used on Sundays except to get out of the sun, and one livery stable that smelled like everything you'd expect and a little more. Cole Whitaker had ridden into Redrock Crossing on a Tuesday with a split saddle, $11 in his coat pocket, and a reputation that walked in before he did. Not a famous reputation, not the kind that got you written about in the Eastern papers, just the quiet kind. The kind that made barkeeps set a glass down slow and stable hands look at their boots. He'd done some work nobody talked about. He'd ridden some jobs nobody asked about twice. And now, at 31 years old, he was tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. He needed a place to breathe. Redrock Crossing was cheap enough to breathe in. He took a room above the livery for $2 a week, ate most of his meals at the counter of a place called Marcy's, which wasn't really called Marcy's. That was just what the locals called it, because a woman named Markey ran the kitchen, and she'd outlasted 3 different owners, and the name just stuck. That's where he met Eliza Voss. She wasn't waiting tables. She was fixing a broken hinge on the back door with a screwdriver, and a look on her face that suggested the hinge had personally offended her. Cole walked past her, sat at the counter, and made the mistake of saying, "And I want you to understand." He thought he was being charming. "You sure you don't want me to do that for you, ma'am?" She didn't look up. "I'm sure," she said. "I've been fixing hinges since before you learned how to ask useless questions." The man next to Cole at the counter laughed into his coffee. Cole ate his eggs in silence. Now, here's what you need to know about Eliza Voss. She had come to Redrock Crossing 3 years earlier with her father, who was a surveyor and a dreamer, and, unfortunately, the kind of man who trusted too many handshakes with too little paperwork. When he passed, lung fever, fast and without warning, she was left with a half-finished claim. 60 acres of scrub land she didn't want to sell, and a set of skills most women in 1882 were never supposed to need. She could read a land survey. She could negotiate a supply contract. She could drive a mule team 40 miles without stopping, and she could fix a hinge. She had her father's stubbornness and her mother's way of cutting through nonsense, and she had no particular interest in being rescued by anyone. That's not the same as not wanting to be loved, but you'd be surprised how many men never figured out the difference. Cole figured it out, slowly and badly. It started the way it always starts, with proximity and small moments. Marcy's counter every morning, a nod when she came in, a quiet morning that she returned with something that might have been a half smile if you squinted and were optimistic. He found out she was having trouble with a neighbor, a man named Garland Pruitt, who had filed a competing claim on a portion of her 60 acres and was using the slowness of the county clerk's office to his advantage. Cole wasn't a lawyer, but he knew something about the way paperwork moved, and he knew someone in the county seat who owed him a favor. He made one ride. He never told her about it. 2 weeks later, Pruitt's competing claim was quietly withdrawn. She never knew why. Cole never said. That's the kind of man he was. One who helped from the shadows because saying it out loud felt like too much to ask of himself. But here's where things crack open. And this is the part I want you to really think about, because you may have been on one side of this exact moment yourself. It was a Saturday evening at the saloon. Cole was at a corner table with two men he knew mildly, ranch hands named Dutch and Arlo. And Eliza had come in because it was the only place in town to get news, and there was word that the water rights dispute up at Harlan Creek had been settled. She stood at the bar, talked to the barkeep, got her information, and turned to leave. Dutch, who had had 3 too many, and was the kind of man who got louder the dumber he felt, leaned over to Cole and said something low and grinning about Eliza. Something about how it was a shame a woman like that was so hard to handle. Cole should have said nothing, or he should have said the real thing. Instead, he did what men do when they're scared of meaning something. He made it a joke. He leaned back in his chair and said, loud enough for a few people around them to catch it, "Hell, Dutch, any man would be proud to call a woman like that his." He thought it was safe. Admiration without exposure. Praise without risk. The kind of compliment that sounds like something, but commits to nothing. Eliza had not fully left. She was 3 steps from the door when she heard it. She turned around. The room, the parts of it paying attention, went the particular kind of quiet that happens when something real is about to happen, in a place that doesn't see much of it. She looked straight at Cole, not at Dutch, not at Arlo, at Cole. And she said it quietly, barely above the creak of the floorboards. "Then say it yourself." And she walked out. Now, here's where we pause, because I want to ask you something directly. Have you ever been in a room where someone just said the exact thing that needed saying? Where the truth just landed, and you could feel it on your skin? Drop something in the comments, because I know I'm not the only one who's felt that. Cole Whitaker sat in that chair for a long moment after the door swung shut behind her. Dutch said something. Cole didn't hear it. Arlo refilled his drink. Cole didn't touch it. He sat there, and he felt, for the first time in a long while, genuinely caught. Not by a lawman, not by a past, by something much harder to outrun. A woman who had simply required him to be honest. He left the saloon 15 minutes later without another word. The thing about pride is that it rarely looks like pride from the inside. From the inside, it looks like thinking, like being reasonable, like giving things time. Cole Whitaker spent 4 days being reasonable. He told himself she wasn't interested. He told himself she'd made her meaning clear. He told himself a woman like Eliza Voss didn't need a man who'd spent the last decade making quiet decisions in shadow, and that she deserved better than whatever patchwork version of a man he was these days. He told himself all of it. And every morning at Marcy's counter, he ordered his eggs and his coffee, and he watched the back door for the sound of that hinge, the one she'd fixed, the one that now swung clean and even, and he waited for her to walk through it. On the 5th morning, she did. She sat down 2 stools away, ordered her coffee, and then, without looking at him, she said, "You ride out to the county seat about 3 weeks ago." Cole's jaw tightened slightly. "Once or twice," he said. "Business." Garland Pruitt dropped his claim. "I heard." She turned and looked at him then. "You hear a lot of things," she said. "Sometimes." She turned back to her coffee. Let the silence breathe. And then, "You're not as hard to read as you think you are, Whitaker." And this is the part I want you to hold on to, because this is what the story is actually about. Not the romance, not the frontier, not any of the trappings. It's about this. The moment when someone sees you clearly, and the question is whether you'll let them. Most people don't. Most people take the way out. They deflect. They move on. They make it a joke and drive away from the moment as fast as they can. Cole Whitaker almost did it again. You could see it in the way his shoulders moved, the slight rotation toward a comfortable non-answer. But something stopped him. Maybe it was the hinge. Maybe it was the way she'd said his name. Maybe it was 4 days of sitting with the weight of that saloon moment and knowing that he was tired of swallowing the right words. He set his coffee cup down. He looked at her. "You want to hear something that's going to sound foolish?" she said. "It usually does." He said, "I'm proud to know you. I'd be more than proud, and I mean that. Not as a compliment and not as a joke, and not as something I'm saying because it's easy. I mean it the way a man means something when he's finally done making it smaller than it is." Eliza Voss looked at him for a long moment. Outside, the wind came across the ridges and pushed a little dust down the main street. And someone's horse huffed at the rail, and the whole town of Redrock Crossing just sat there. She said, "That took you long enough." And she did not move away. Now, I'm going to need you all to hit that subscribe button before we go any further. Because what happened next, at Marcy's counter, is exactly the kind of thing you'll want to be here for when we explore what came next in this world. And if you think a man like Cole Whitaker suddenly had things figured out just because he said one true sentence, then you've clearly never been to a frontier town. Stick around. We're just getting started. What followed was not a fairy tale. The frontier didn't do fairy tales. It did mornings and hard work and the kind of closeness that builds when two people decide, slowly, without ceremony, that they're worth the effort. Cole stayed in Redrock Crossing through the fall and into the early winter. He took work where he could find honest work, helping the cattlemen 3 miles north repair fencing, riding courier between Redrock and the county seat twice a month. He was done with the other kind of work. He didn't say so out loud. He just stopped doing it. Eliza's 60 acres of scrub land turned out to have something underneath it. Not gold, not silver, just better soil than anyone had tested for, and a spring that had been written off as seasonal, but ran through February. She started putting in a garden that spring. Cole helped her pull stones. He was not good at it. He said so. She said that was fine because she wasn't looking for a stone expert. "What are you looking for?" he asked her, which was, and he knew it, a real question. She looked across the half-cleared field, and she said, "Someone who doesn't make me feel like a problem to be solved." Cole thought about that for a while. "I can do that," he said. "You can try," she said, which was honest. And honesty, on the frontier, was worth more than most things. There was still Garland Pruitt to contend with. A man like Pruitt doesn't lose paperwork quietly and walk away grateful. He stewed. He came back around in March with a different angle. Not a land claim this time, but a complaint about a boundary fence that he said Eliza's hired hand had put 18 inches into his property. It was the kind of complaint that was technically about fence posts, but actually about power. About whether a woman alone on 60 acres was going to hold her ground or get worn down by 100 small pressures until she sold and left. Cole was at the property when Pruitt rode up with 2 of his men. This is where I need to be careful, because what happened was not what you might expect if you've seen too many frontier stories where these things resolve with thunder and smoke. It did not. There was no thunder. What happened was, Cole stepped forward. He stood between Pruitt and Eliza, not to take over, not to fight her battle, but just to be present in the way that tells another man that someone here has decided this matters. And he said, plainly, and without raising his voice, "The survey says the fence is correct. I rode out and checked it myself this morning. You're welcome to have your own man look. But until there's a different measurement, this conversation is done." Pruitt looked at him. He looked at Eliza. He looked at his 2 men. and he left. It's not always dramatic. Sometimes that's all it is. Someone standing where they're supposed to stand. By the time summer came to Redrock Crossing, the town had noticed. Small towns always notice. They noticed that Cole Whitaker ate most of his dinners at Eliza Voss's property now, not at the counter at Marcy's. They noticed that the scrub field had a real furrow to it, and the beginnings of something green. They noticed that when Cole rode out for the county seat, there was a letter from Eliza in his coat pocket, and when he came back, there was one from the county clerk's office addressed to her. They were building something. It didn't have a name yet. The frontier was not a place where things got named quickly. Names cost something out there. But it was being built. And here's what I want you to think about, because this is the real heart of this story, and I think it applies to every single person watching this right now. The question isn't whether you feel something. Almost everyone feels something for someone at some point. The question is whether you let it stay as a feeling, or whether you make it into something true. Cole Whitaker spent 3 decades making feelings into nothing, letting the right thing sit there on his tongue and swallowing it back down, turning what was real into a joke, a gesture, a quiet favor no one would trace back to him. And the one time he let it be true, out loud, without armor around it, everything changed. Not because the words were magic, but because she'd been waiting, not for a perfect man, not for a savior, not for someone with clean hands and a clean past, just for someone who was willing to stop hiding. Isn't that almost always what it comes down to? Let me know in the comments, have you ever been on either side of that? The person who hid behind a joke, or the person waiting for someone to just say the real thing? I read everything. In October of 1882, with the first frost just starting to touch the ridges, Cole Whitaker asked Eliza Voss if she would let him stay. Not dramatically. Not on a knee in front of witnesses. Just quietly at the edge of her field, with the sky going, the color it goes when the day is almost done, and the air tastes like cold and wood smoke, and the particular silence of a place where nothing needs to be performed. He said, "I know I came here with $11 and a split saddle. I know I'm not what anyone would put together if they were building something from scratch. But I'd like to try to be worth staying for, if you'll let me." She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "You pulled 47 stones out of that field." He said, "There are more." She said, "I know." And then she looked at him the way she'd looked at him in the saloon, straight on, no flinching, and she said, "Ask me properly, Whitaker." He did. She said yes. The frontier, for all its hardness, had a way of making space for things that decided to grow. Eliza's garden came in stronger the following spring than anyone had expected. Cole's fence work held through 2 winters. The spring on the 60 acres ran through April, and Redrock Crossing, which barely had a name worth remembering, remembered 2 things about those years, long after most of its buildings had decided whether they were standing or falling. That a woman named Eliza had worked 60 acres into something real, and that a man named Cole had finally learned the difference between meaning something and making it safe. This video is a work of artistic reconstruction created using artificial intelligence, developed independently and exclusively with the goal of entertaining and creating something that stays with you. The characters, names, locations, and situations you've seen here are fictional and exist entirely within the imagination of their creators. For any reference to historical periods, geography, or social context, we always encourage you to explore official and verified sources. The American frontier was a real and complex chapter of history, and it deserves your curiosity beyond what any single story can hold.